like sometimes it helps people gauge how close they should be to the mic, or maybe people just like hearing themselves.
Oh, I see. I've never done a podcast.
I love hearing myself talk.
You might think that when I was teaching. Okay, that seems all right to me.
Yeah, so how you been? What's
Fine.
going on with you?
Well, let's see. In the summer, I'm a teacher, so.
Well, during not the summer, you're also a teacher.
Right. Nah. Are we starting now?
What?
Are we starting? You're gonna edit.
Yeah.
You're gonna edit it. I see.
Well, no. Yes and no.
Okay. Let's see. I am a teacher during the school year, and then on the off season, I'm an artist. And it's summer, so I am making tons and tons of art.
All right. What kind of art?
Well, I started out with woodworking, and then I'm morphing into using paper.
Right. Okay. Hold on a second. I'm just going to turn off my phone.
Okay.
I forget. Do you have a cell phone? Do you own a cell phone?
No, I don't have a cell phone. Isn't that a thing? That'll be a thing on the podcast. People will go, "What? She doesn't have a cell phone."
Why is that? Why don't you have a cell phone?
I don't want to be that accessible. It's true. I don't. You know.
Is that why it took you a week to answer my email?
What email? Oh, I wasn't looking at that email. I wasn't looking at that email account.
Yeah.
Because, again, I'm off.
Yeah.
And if I look at it, it means something's happening, and then I'll have to attend to it because I'm very.
Try not to knock the table.
I know.
But, all right.
I talk with my hands.
Well, that doesn't matter when we're on a podcast. But
I know. I know, but that's why I keep hitting stuff.
Oh, well, I guess it does matter then. Yeah.
Right.
Now. How long have you been you teach at Northwestern Connecticut Community College?
Correct.
As in the arts department. How long have you been there?
20 years. That's a long time. 20 years, yeah. And I really love it, though. I really love working at the community college level. I think it's really a good place to be.
You're in the arts department, but you're not based in the arts building. You're
teaching graphic design.
Yeah.
Well, it is in the art department overall, but it is, I've always found that graphic design somehow ends up away from the art department.
Because it's not exactly traditional media. It's not like drawing or painting or something like that.
No, it's not like drawing or painting, but it certainly is. I would say, I think it was in the Bauhaus when they officially recognized graphic design as a medium,
right?
But it's certainly, as you know, media and graphic design are all art forms, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a degree in graphic design?
Oh, that's a good story or a good question because I have a master's in new media. That's what they called it at Maine College of Art. I got my master's at Maine College of Art in 2001. And at that time, it was called new media because it was a new medium, this kind of digital video. I think at the time I thought, what happens 10 years from now or 20 years from now when it's not new anymore. It's just media. So, but I did get my degree there in at Maine College of Art in new media.
And where did you get your bachelor's?
Oh, Plymouth State College in New Hampshire. So a small liberal arts college in the White Mountains of New Hampshire.
In what field?
Printmaking.
Oh, okay, printmaking.
Yeah. So there's a connection between printmaking and graphic design for sure.
Okay. And were you always interested in arts, making art?
That's another. When I went to school, I was a PE major. I wanted to be. I wanted to be a PE teacher.
Wait, what? Really?
Yes. It's not that funny, but. And then I took a ceramics class and said, "Oh, this is where I should be," and that's how I did it. My mother's also an artist, so.
Okay. Well, what does she do in terms of art?
She does watercolor primarily. When I was young, she was getting her a master's in art, and I watched her, do that. So there's been art around our family a long time.
Now, we're kind of going backwards. Went from your master's to your bachelor's now, and now we're gonna wait. Where exactly are you from?
Where was I born, or where I'm from?
All of it. I mean, I know a lot of times people are raised somewhere they're not born. So.
Oh, true. Well, my father was in the military, so I traveled all over the world.
Okay.
So I saw a lot of different things. I think.
But where's your launch pad? Like where?
Where was I born? Berg, Germany. There you go. And now I'm in Torrington, Connecticut. So go figure.
And how often did you move growing up?
Oh, probably once every 2 years. So I
did you ever end up staying in a place like for a while?
No, always moving.
When you like introduce yourself to people, what exactly would you say in terms of like where you did your primary growing up?
I tell them my father was in the military, and most people go, oh, and they nod their head like they understand what that was about.
Right. And so born in Germany, and then like what can you run down the places you lived?
Oh, well, all over the East Coast. So Kentucky, New York, West Point, which is where the U.S. Military Academy is, Army. And the exotic places, I lived in England. I went to high school in England.
England is exotic?
Well, in the Philippines, which is also, that's pretty exotic.
Okay.
And then, of course, let's see, those are the exciting places, but mostly the East Coast.
Okay. And you said you went to high school in England.
I went to high school in England.
Where in England? Was it like near...
I went to a military school in Hertfordshire, which is...
Hertfordshire?
Hertfordshire, yes. So, yeah, and I lived there for 2 years in England, so that was good. As a teen, so I wasn't really young. Sometimes when you're moving from place to place, you're young, you don't get it. But I was in my teens in England, so I really got to experience. I remember it very well.
And what exactly? Were you... When were you in England? In your teens?
A long time ago. But I was in, let's see, I was probably my junior and senior year of high school in England. And I lived what they call on the economy, meaning live with the English people.
Right. Sometimes
military, like when we were in the Philippines, we were on a base, an army base.
Right.
But in England, we lived with the English people. So I lived with the English people. I was in their culture.
And if you could give me a time frame, like was this...
that was in 1976.
That means you were there when like British punk broke or something like that.
Yes, correct.
And so,
but I didn't really. I saw Queen though.
Oh, okay. So, if you were living in England during the 70s,
yes.
What that mean? Were you like aware of like and absorbing the culture, the music, the art?
Definitely the culture. As I said, I lived with the English people, but we kind of lived out in the countryside, so it'd be like here. Right. If you live out in the country, there's what's going on in their little towns. But if you lived in New York City, you would know all the bands, the rock and all that stuff. So I feel like my experience was more about the rural, being in England in a rural place, not the city.
Okay.
So no influence about the Sex Pistols, which you're talking about.
Now, you graduated from high school in England,
yes,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you went straight to New Hampshire.
Yes. We had a summer cottage in New Hampshire, so that was.
Oh, okay.
As a person in the military, New Hampshire became our base because every summer we'd go back to New Hampshire.
Right. So Plymouth State College is a school. Where is that in New Hampshire?
It's in Plymouth, New Hampshire, which is just outside from the White Mountains. And again, I went in studying phys ed. Yeah. He thinks that's funny. And ended up studying art, which was a good transition.
Now, when you say you were studying physical education, what exactly would lead you to think about studying that?
Phys ed? Because I was very, active, played basketball, played softball, rode bikes, just was active.
And so the aspiration was to teach children
gym. Yeah,
gym.
Be a gym teacher, Now I'm an art teacher at a college instead.
Now, and you said, how long were you studying PE before you decided to do art instead?
It was only the first year. Like I say, I started taking the general classes, English, math, general classes, and I took an art course, ceramics, and then I started taking the PE courses, kinesiology, all kinds of...
What exactly is that?
Kinesiology is the study of the body, like how the body moves, muscles, so... and that was, as you can imagine, intense, And I much more enjoyed ceramics than I did kinesiology. So I was like, wow, I think I should study art instead.
Now, you don't exactly do ceramics now.
No.
Which means, what exactly was the progression from like you taking a ceramics class to like taking other art classes to getting into like graphic design or new media, as they said back then?
Well, I think what's interesting about my evolution in new media is that I started from the ground up. I'm old enough to remember life without computers at all. And then it slowly came into being. It slowly came into being. And I got a job at Hartford Art School as a technician, graphic design technician. Mm-hmm. And there was a room full of computers, little Mac Classics. It was the first Mac lab at University of Hartford. So I grew up with the technology. I remember 2 programs, and now there's a billion programs. So how did I end up into graphic design? That was where the job opening was at Hartford Art School. And
do you remember your first computer?
I do. It was a little Mac Classic. Yeah.
And
you know what a Mac Classic is, right?
Maybe not.
Black and white.
What year was that?
The year I started at Hartford Art School was 1989.
Okay. And you remember like the progression of like what was technology in like computer your refinement of computer technology, was it as fast as say now? Did you see like new models coming out like every year, and like you could notice the progression of where it was going?
Yes, it got more and more complicated. It started out with just black and white, little black and white monitors, and the monitors got bigger and the machines got more powerful. The programs got more complicated and sophisticated. For example, there was a 3D modeling program that would fit on a floppy disk, which sounds unbelievable today.
And those floppy disks, they had a capacity of like
2 megabytes.
It could it could fit like a 1-minute instrumental song.
Yes, and it fit a whole 3D modeling program at the time. And then again, everything got more complicated, more sophisticated. Another kind of turning point in the progression of computer technology was the Program Director, which was the first program that was for animation. And we made a little smiley face, and it went across the screen, and we lost our minds. We lost our minds.
Holy crap, it moved.
I know. I mean, look at it, it's moving. When I was in graduate school in 1999, you couldn't listen to a song on a computer and use the program at the same time. I know, he thinks this is funny, but this is the way it was.
It had no RAM. It just...
Yeah. Well, it's just... Yeah, they had no RAM. The Mac Classics had 4 megabytes of RAM. That's what it came on board with that. Man. Yeah. And again, 2 programs, and it was just completely a different world than it is today. Like, today's is phenomenal. Oh, and when also in 1999 there was no internet. We didn't have the internet.
Yeah. Now, based on my time spent with you, I've seen you have a particular way you use a mouse.
Oh, yes.
Because it looks backwards.
Oh, it is backwards. You want me to tell that story?
Yeah.
Again, I'm talking about the history of the evolution of using the Mac, and especially in the graphic design industry. And I was hired as an artist in 1990. No, it'd be 89 again. No, 90. Must have been 1990. I was working as a graphic designer in a production company, and they brought these Macintoshes in, and they said, "Okay, here, you learn them. Just learn it." They just gave it to the artists, the production artists. We were doing paste up and stat camera and all Linotrons and things like that, and so there was a a little TV with a video a cassette recorder, video VHS.
Yeah.
We stuck it in there, and there's a guy in a white lab coat telling us how to use the Macintosh. And my friend and I were looking at the mouse. You got to remember, we didn't know what a mouse was.
Yeah.
It's a brand new technology, and so we figured the cord comes off the end, like everything else. A toaster cord comes off the end. So I started using the mouse with the cord coming off the end, which is, of course, upside down. So, and I've tried to periodically. I tried to change, but then I was like, "Oh, forget it." You think that's funny?
Yeah, it is because anyone who grew up using a regular mouse could notice. Oh, you move it up, then the cursor goes up.
Yeah. For me, it's the opposite. And I have, to this day, I have students say to me, "You're using the mouse upside down." I'm like, I've been teaching for 20 years. I think I understand that.
It's like you're playing a video game, but you have the aiming mechanics inverted.
Yeah. Interesting enough, I really am a spaz when it comes to video games. I can't play them because I'm too spastic. Yeah, I just, yeah.
What does that mean?
I just can't figure out how to do it, and everything happens way too fast. So. Not interested in video games. Your
Pong is more your speed. Is that?
Maybe. I'd still spaz out on that, I think. That's funny.
Now, so you go to Plymouth State.
Yes.
You start studying phys ed, but you move to art.
Yeah, I changed over to printmaking.
Printmaking. You get a degree in printmaking.
Yes.
Now, I don't really understand what printmaking is.
Yeah.
What exactly is printmaking?
Well, it's kind of the precursor to graphic design before we had computers to do all the work.
It's analog graphic design. Is that what it is?
In a way, yes. I mean, I did silk screening. I did relief printing, all the different kinds of printmaking techniques.
Okay.
So, but right. Northwestern, where you went to school, has no printmaking. So, but mostly I focused on silkscreen, which everybody understands that.
What exact? So, but how exactly does it work?
Silkscreening, or
no, I mean like printmaking in general. I still don't quite understand what it means to print make, like the mechanics behind it. What exactly happens?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. Let's say silk screening. In silk screening, you have a kind of a mesh, and you put a stencil on top of it, similar to if you were going to tag something. If you're doing spray painting, you'd have a stencil, and then you pour the ink on it. You take a squeegee and rub the squeegee over it onto a shirt, and whatever the stencil was will show up on the shirt. So that's silk screening, and then let's say relief printing. Everybody's done linoleum block printing. Did you do that in school?
I'm not sure what you just said, so no.
Linoleum block printing? No.
No, I've never heard of that. No.
Oh, okay. So you take a piece of wood that has a piece of linoleum on it, which is soft, and you take a gouger and you gouge a image in it. You just want a leaf, let's say, you just, sculpt out a leaf, and you put ink on top of the linoleum, and you put a piece of paper on it and rub it and pull it off, and you get a print of it.
Oh, okay.
So that, but then I didn't do anything with art for a long time. Or I was working at a silkscreen place. I was a production manager at a silkscreen shop. I did that for a while.
Where?
In New Hampshire, also.
Okay.
And then for a while, I was just working as a bartender and a waitress for a while to make ends meet.
You mean you were being an artist?
Yeah, I wasn't doing any art at that time.
So how long were you in New Hampshire for?
Oh, a long time. I was in New Hampshire for probably 10 years, and I moved around there. From
the time you were starting school and then past. And so, 6 years after you graduated, you were in New Hampshire, not exactly doing art, but just
making ends meet. just making a living. Making a living. Trying to when you're in your 20s, I think you just kind of you experiment. You try to figure out what you're doing.
But during that time, weren't you in the back of your mind? You were just but I want to just make stuff.
No. No, I really didn't do much art in my 20s, and then I got the job at Hartford Art School in 98.
Is that what brought you down to Connecticut?
I met somebody, got married to somebody who's from Connecticut, and that's how I ended up in Connecticut.
Okay, and didn't you get a master's in education at the University of Hartford?
Yes, I did.
At Hartford?
At U of H, yep.
Okay, and you were working there as a technician at the Hartford Art School, and then during that time you got your master's
in education. Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can get the timeline right. You came down to Connecticut when?
In 88, I would say.
Okay, and then at some point you went to graduate school at the Maine College of Art in Portland, Maine. In
2001. So I got my degree. I got a master's in education. I would say in the mid-90s. Then I got my job at Northwestern. And then in 2001, I went to Maine College of Art and got a second master's degree in fine art, MFA.
I'm not very knowledgeable about art schools, especially in the United States. Were you looking at many art schools to get a master's degree? What exactly made the Maine College of Art jump out to you?
They had a low residency program.
Oh, okay.
Meaning,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I could still work full time. I also had small children at the time, and I could work full time and still get my master's. And the master's degree at Maine College of Art was excellent. It changed my whole art making outlook. It made me want to make art. As I mentioned, I didn't do a lot of artwork for a while, and then I went to the Maine College of Art, and I became a professional artist after that.
When did you stop working at the Hartford Art School at the University of Hartford?
In 96. That's when I got my job.
Because I was thinking that, depending on when the time frame of when you were working at the Hartford Art School, why didn't you just get a master's degree there? Did they have a program for this newfangled new media back then, or
no? They did not. And the only reason why I started making digital work is because I was at Hartford Art School, as I mentioned, as the technician there, and I was working with computers, and it was my job to teach students how to use a computer. I wasn't in the classroom, but I was the person in the lab helping people.
Right.
And so I realized I had a flair for it. And so I kind of embraced the technology as I grew skill-wise as the technology got more complicated.
Okay. So how long is that program at the Maine College of Art, this MFA?
The low residency MFA at Maine College of Art is 2 years.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's low residency, that means you're what does that mean? I'm not sure what that means.
You go there for the summer for 8 weeks, and you're in there in an intensive, and they have theory classes, which was also great. That was another thing that kind of pushed my my desire to make art this theory, learning theory, reading about reading letters from famous artists, and reading all kinds of philosophy about art making. All that I thought was, kind of trained my mind to be a better artist.
Right. Okay.
And then, what was I saying about that? I forgot what I was saying about that.
Now, I was not really knowing much about these MFA programs or whatever. I was under the assumption that low residency meant you're not at the school.
Yeah, that's
lot,
what I finished.
And it's like you go in there maybe a few times.
No, it was 8 weeks. That's what I was saying. 8 weeks in the summer in Portland, Maine. Very awesome. And then on the off season or during work, we would have local mentors helping us. We continued to make art. We continued to write papers. We continued to check in with our advisors. Right. And the first year I work with a teacher at Maine College of Art. He was a professor at Maine College of Art. That's who I had the first semester or the first year, and then the second year I worked with a couple in Brooklyn who were working with media also. Both of those people, George LaRue at Maine College of Art, and then what were their names? Can't remember the names of the people that were doing in Brooklyn, but I learned a lot going down there too. Seeing more what was happening in the city, but in both, the whole time I was doing new media, I was learning new media, film and, well, I wouldn't call it film. I'd call it video. More experiment. Film is, I think, different than video. Don't you think?
I wouldn't say there's a big difference, especially now, because if you think about the modern landscape of filmmaking, most of it's digital. And so the way I look at it, video production, the way we think about it now, it's essentially digital filmmaking for commercial purposes. In film, it's you're making like narratives or documentary,
right?
As part of like someone's vision for a project. But like video production, it is for commercial purposes, like music videos, commercials, promotional content for a company, stuff like that.
Yep. So you would say film is more like narrative, and
it's the artsy
part of.
It's the artsy side of the coin.
Yeah,
that is film. And I think of film and video production being the same set of skills,
just
used for different purposes.
Oh, right.
There's both sides of the same coin. Film is like the artsy side, and then video production is more the commercial side.
Right. I agree.
When did you first encounter making video?
Let's see. I was let's see. I guess they asked me if I would teach video. And I had been doing experimental video at home as just kind of a sideline. I kind of taught myself that. And I really liked it. I always thought of, you're going to like this, the Beastie Boys have a thing, and they call themselves the scientists of sound. Well, I call myself the scientist of media because I like the way the Beastie Boys would scratch sound, and I do that a lot in my own video, back stuff up, move stuff forward, and scratch it in the same way that they did. That's my style. And, of course, MTV was a profound influence on that because, again, I'm old enough to remember when MTV was introduced to the world.
And it actually played music videos?
Yes, they actually did. And the videos were actually quite interesting. And, it's not just drinking beer and driving a boat. They were real art forms, real small art forms, art videos. Yeah.
For some reason, I kind of don't like music videos because when... Like most it seems like there's, at least I think there's 3 different types of music videos. There are ones that are basically performance videos. It's not a live performance, but it's a music video made centered around them performing, like just in a garage or something, or in some place
or whatever.
And then there's another form where it's them trying to make like a short film that's got a whole narrative, but it's set to this music, and it seems kind of pretentious to me.
Yes.
Like they're trying to make a music video more than it should be, or whatever. And then there's the more like abstract-y real artsy music videos where it's like they're really trying to play with, I think the best kind of examples I can think of are you aware of Beck?
Oh, yes, of course.
He had a music video.
Loser?
Yeah. And have you heard his recent stuff?
Not within the last few years, but
because he had this this music video for a song called Colors, like a couple years ago.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
You wouldn't have seen it, but it's like very colorful. It was directed by Edgar Wright, the guy who did Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and it stars Alison Brie, an actress, and it's like very colorful because it's called Colors, and it's like it's got a bunch of like people and guys in leotards that also cover their faces, and they're just like blue and yellow, and they're on his raised platform, and they're dancing and such, and it's kind of, it's stuff that's kind of like pushing what it means to like film a thing and make it into a music video.
Yeah.
Kind of like maybe this is an example you'd be more familiar with, like Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel.
Oh, that's fantastic. Stop motion.
Yeah.
Yes. That is stop motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And or like Take On Me by Aha.
You think, that's kind of like a performance video, no?
I mean, sort of, but
the lines are blurred.
But they're, it's not just them performing. It's what is it? It's like a bunch of hand-drawn.
Yes, some animation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you remember? When did you actually start making video?
I would say I really started doing it on my own, self-taught, around 2003. I was working for a nonprofit in Torrington called Artwell, and they always had these shows, and it would be like, oh, it's a cat show, do something about cats, So I got myself a copy of Final Cut 4.5, which is a great editing program, and I just started making video. And again, it definitely lots of cuts, forward, backward, very abstract. I wouldn't say I would sit down and write a story and then try to animate that. I am more interested in terms of video, the way those little branches are moving on that tree, and I would film that, and then maybe do a lot of that, and then splice all those together in a kind of abstraction. Okay.
Are you enough of a gearhead to remember what the first camera you were using, or?
Oh boy, it was a Panasonic. It was a camcorder, of course, and it was after the big chunky video. It was after video, so it was definitely digital. It wasn't like a VCR, one of the big chunky ones like that. But during my MFA, there was a woman named Susan Bickford who was doing video, so I watched her work quite a bit. She had a fancy camera, but I just had a little Panasonic camcorder, and that's what I did. But again, I never considered that a high art. I considered it a way to fulfill my creative need to make things. So I think that's a real trend throughout all my art making, and that is I have a need to make things. I continue to make things, no matter what the medium. I can jump from medium to medium quite easily.
So this means you were doing video as part of your curriculum at the Maine College of Art, right?
No, that wasn't. This is after.
Okay.
I just started doing a video because I wanted to learn how to do it as fun.
Oh, okay.
Some art making for Maine College of Art, or for Artwell. And then again, a couple of years later, Northwestern, where I was working, said, "Hey, can you teach digital video?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'll give it a try." At least I had done it. At least I wasn't thrown right into you're going to teach that now. So
now, when did you start teaching at Northwestern Connecticut Community College?
That was in the 80 or 96. Yeah.
96. You started out teaching what?
I was always graphic design.
Always graphic design?
Yeah.
Okay.
Always graphic design. And then it expanded out to first video, then photography. So I got all that down.
And was photography a thing you always messed around with?
I had always taken pictures, but no, I wouldn't say a photography. And I still think that today. I don't consider myself a photographer per se, but I certainly take photographs every single day. Okay. That might make me a photographer.
Because I guess you could say I sometimes market myself as a photographer because like I technically do have experience doing photography, but it's not quite as close to me as, say, videography, using a camera to film things.
Right. Especially
because I don't take a lot of photos. Not like when you say you take photos, that's like recreationally, right?
I take them for social media.
Okay.
Yeah, to advance I have to document all the artwork I make.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? So I think that when I say I take photographs, it's for social media.
Are you saying you don't take photographs recreationally?
No, not really. Just sometimes through social media, but almost always like, oh, I have nothing to post today. I'll go out and take a picture of that tomato.
Because that's kind of where I am with photography.
Yeah.
I don't take photos recreationally.
Right.
If the closest I get is to make like fine art photography.
Right.
Because I don't keep a lot of photos. The way normal people keep photos, they they take a trip, they take photos of everything they're doing.
Yeah.
And in my case, it's more for practical reasons. Like, say, if I need to remember, when is this place open? I'll snap a photo of their hours on the door, right? Yeah. But eventually I'm gonna remember when they're open, and so I'm gonna delete that photo because I don't need it.
Right.
And the one photo that I keep on, say, my phone, it's not even a photo, it's a graphic of the circle of fifths, which is a tool for musicians. People tend to look at me weird, like, you don't take photos, you don't keep photos. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't like keeping a lot of clutter, like in either physical media, like physical photos, or even digital photos. I like to my devices. I like to keep them rather not cluttered. Not only that, but I told you just a minute ago. I told you about the way people take photos now. It's like they go to a place, they're always taking photos of everything. They're spending every second taking photos. And the thing is, if I were to go on a trip to some faraway place, I would want to spend my time and energy being there instead of spending every second taking photos.
I am going to agree with you. We've almost come full circle because remember, I don't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
So my impulse to just take pictures of everything, and I'm the same, I don't do that. And I'm the same as you. I don't like a lot of digital clutter on my machines. I just keep everything, whatever's active, I keep on there on my computer or in the camera, and then I get rid of it. Sometimes again, for social media, I'll take a picture of installing a fan and then I'll get a good shot of the fan whirring. So I kept that, fan going, which is not easy to capture, and I did. But I agree with you. If you should be where you are rather than take pictures of where you are. It's like the joke about fireworks, because we just went past July 4th, that people instead of watching this phenomenal occurrence of these exploding fireworks in the sky, they've got a camera between them and this phenomenon, you know? So I'm like, that's crazy. You got to watch it, you know?
Yeah.
So I agree with you there.
Let's jump to, we met when I was attending Northwestern Connecticut Community College in,
True.
I think, 2016.
It's possible. Your first year, right?
My first year there in the fall of 2016, when I was enrolling in an art program called Digital Media. And you are the advisor for that program. You're the program director. Right. I wouldn't really call you the head of the department.
No, they don't have those.
Of the arts department.
Yeah.
I think they have a department head, but it's English, Arts, Humanities.
Yeah, there isn't really.
But I see you as one of the few like big figureheads who like are in charge of a lot of the arts things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, mostly I think it's because I run the gallery. So that publicly, I mean, there's teachers that teach in school, everybody knows them. But as far as the bigger world goes, I'm more known because I run the gallery. I do internships like where we are here at Farmington Valley Arts Center. So I'm more visible. What
is the breadth of the different courses you've taught there? So it's like graphic design classes, digital video, digital imaging that I took with you.
Yeah.
You do sometimes photography classes.
No, I've only I taught photo one once, you know, but I don't do like the dark room.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do that.
But does that cover it though? What else is there?
Just those things: graphic design, digital video, and digital photography. Those three things.
But also web design, no?
Yeah, web design is part of the graphic design program.
Right.
Yep.
What was your introduction to designing web pages, all that?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm self-taught because, again, when I started at Hartford Art School, and also at the same time working at a company, computers became the desktop computer was kind of introduced on a mass scale while I was working in the industry. So, again, I have this kind of really good history of it, or starting from nothing and going to what it is today. And so I taught myself all of those things. I taught myself web design. I taught myself, digital video. I retaught myself formally photography because I had to teach it. You know, everybody takes photographs. Everybody thinks they're a photographer because of that phone. You know what I mean? So web design, I learned web design. I took a sabbatical. I took 6 months off of teaching and did all those tutorials online. That's how I learned how to do web design.
Do you remember the first bit you learned? Like, what was it? HTML or?
There was a program called PageMill, which was glorified email. Now that I look back on it, like you couldn't do columns, you couldn't, all you could do was it had an interface and you could just put information. Again, you couldn't put columns, you could put an image, but it was on the next line. So that was my first introduction to web design. And I worked visually for a very, very long time. I didn't get into the HTML because there were these programs, Dreamweaver. Once Dreamweaver came out, again, I worked purely visually. I didn't work with code at all. It took a long time for me to actually understand and work with code. So, and that was a big deal as far as teaching students properly, because before I was just like, oh, I just do it. Now I can read code, and it's important to know code.
I have to say, even after taking a web design class with you, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. I think of all the lots of people can learn Illustrator. Lots of people can learn Photoshop, but
I haven't learned any of those yet.
Yes, you have. But
I know how to auto tone on Photoshop. That's about it.
I think I think Dreamweaver is one of the, the learning curve for web design is very high, and that you're probably have more success if you're a programmer than if you are a visual artist, because those two.
Well, I'm neither of those things.
I think there's a conflict for visual artists for programming. I really like web design, though. I really like the power of web design.
Do you, when you teach web design, if you could teach me web design right now,
yes.
what would you try to tell people so they can understand like how the code works? Like if we in that class, interactive media at Northwestern Connecticut Community College.
Plug. Yes.
The primary program we used was Dreamweaver.
Correct.
I can remember bits, vaguely remember bits of how that worked, but I think it's because I probably wasn't exposed to programming, or
but you didn't want to do it.
The language of yes, or the language of code early on enough. So I have no clue what it all means.
I think the first thing I do when I start to show people how to do web design is I bring out a set of Legos, one of the bigger blocks. What are the big blocks called? The mega
blocks?
No. Lego has the little blocks and then they have the little kid. Anyway, I bring those out and I show people, I make a website with the big blocks. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good example of if you were going to explain to people how web pages are made, they're made up of these things called div tags, which are basically blocks of space. Mm-hmm. And then when they talk about pixels, they're talking about web pages are made of pixels. So in the corner, it starts at 0, 0, and then 1, 1, 2, 2, and it goes on to a big grid there. Mm-hmm. And everything is fit on that huge grid. And so if you're a trained designer, it's easier to learn web design because you're still working in the grid format, even more so because it's much more structured. So just think about Legos and a building block. And if you want to keep it as a square, you can only use so many Legos. If you try to stick in one that's too big, the whole thing falls apart. So,
did you ever use programs other than Dreamweaver to do web design?
Yeah, and I bet anybody listening to this will go, "Oh, Dreamweaver, that's so lame." It's pretty lame, but it's basically an interface so that you can work in HTML. So I think anybody could work any HTML writer. It doesn't have to be Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver has a lot of it writes the code for you, whereas other programs, you are writing the code yourself.
Yeah, but from what I recall, using Dreamweaver, you don't have to write the code per se, but it's still like you have to go through what seems like 20 to 30 mouse clicks in order to get what you want.
Yes. Yeah, but if you wrote code, if you were a coder, you wouldn't do that. You'd just write it like a sentence. Yeah,
but have you ever used something like, what is it called?
Komodo or...
I don't know what that is. But like the only other program I know about is that sounds close-ish to like Dreamweaver is Adobe Muse.
That's different. Muse has a bunch of built-in templates, correct? Like a CMS.
Yeah, it's specifically for people who don't want to be... Yeah. It's like people who don't want to be doing the code bit.
Right.
Have you ever used one where you don't use code?
Oh, absolutely. Like Squarespace or WordPress, Squarespace.
Oh, shit.
Perch, all kinds of...
You just gave me... Can I just say WordPress is shit?
Terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. If you're going to make a website on your own, I would suggest Squarespace.
The only upside to WordPress is it's free. No?
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Because when we were learning WordPress in that class, it's not intuitive.
Correct.
It's just not intuitive.
Yeah.
And so it feels like there's all these, nothing is organized what I would say correctly.
Right. Well, it's not an Adobe product, so you were trained or learned on Adobe products, right?
Yeah.
Illustrator. I think a lot of people have trouble, especially graphic designers, learning graphic designers have trouble with web design because it is so structured. When you're working in Illustrator, you can put anything anywhere.
Yeah.
With Dreamweaver, it's got to be here or here. It can't be, a little over there, a little bit. It's got to be specifically where you put it.
And in the case of WordPress, it's just a mess.
Yeah, WordPress is not... I think these are what they call content management systems, CMSs. I think they set up WordPress for people who absolutely have no intention of designing anything, and they just want to stick the information on, change the information on an already built page.
But the thing is, if you are using WordPress,
yes,
and you want to just change a thing, or I have specific memories of trying to learn WordPress and wondering where they put this one certain thing. It's 3 levels down in a particular pathway of clicks, but then it's also in another place 3 levels up or something like that.
Yeah. It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying Squarespace is not like that. Squarespace is a lot more like Dreamweaver in the sense that you can just drag things around on the page and it'll go where you want it to go. But as in terms of WordPress, you get what you pay for. Remember you said it was free?
Yeah.
WordPress is great if you buy a template that is much more sophisticated than the free version of WordPress. And then you may like WordPress, but otherwise...
But if you're paying for stuff at that point, you might as well just get Squarespace.
Yeah, Squarespace is so great. My son, who's a coder, used to call it, he does call it the video game of web design because it's so, easy to use.
It is intuitive. It takes all the code out of the equation.
Yeah, you can't
and so you can just intuitively drag and drop things, make things
bigger, smaller.
Mm-hmm. They act like windows, on an operating system, right? You can just grab the corner, make it bigger.
Oh, like 10, yes. Yeah. It's what I was talking about. There's that underlying grid, and Squarespace completely, creates the WYSIWYG for it. Mm-hmm. And if you move the Squarespace boxes around, you can see them jump a little bit. That's the grid, the underlying grid that is that you're working on.
Right. Okay. What would you say to, say, a student like me that you had, who is not much of a designer, doesn't really work well in graphic design or web design?
To what? You mean whether you want a website or not, or if you want a design site?
Do you think, I really don't think I have, my mind works the way it should in order to grasp design.
Oh, right.
To be a designer.
Yeah.
Because, I have this degree in digital media, and I think, part of it is kind of graphic designy stuff. So, but I feel so in a way you could say I technically have training in that field, but it's not, I can't do it. Right.
What would I say to those people that don't do it? I think there's people have innate talents for things, and then they say, I can really sing well. I want to be a singer, and then they have to train themselves to do it. You know what I mean? For example, I'm right now teaching myself how to sew. I've never been good at it, but I'm going to force myself to do it. And I think all things like that, all skills, you just have to train yourself. You have to have the motivation, the inner motivation for it, and then you have to have the desire to do it, to train yourself.
I have this kind of mind where I would say I'm adept at math and science. I like looking at the nuts and bolts of how a system works and all that, to the point where I learned how to build a computer in a week or something like that.
Yeah.
Just because I vaguely knew what all the parts did and how they fit together. It was just a matter of being able to look at it all big picture, see how it all fits together, and know how each of the bits relate to each other, to the point where I was like, oh, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. But in the case of being a designer, like, I'm not much of an artist. The reason I have a degree in digital media is because I don't work well in traditional media. I don't draw or paint very well. But then I'm also not great at most digital media because I don't really like doing graphic design or web design or photography, really. The thing I really want to do is like filmmaking. What do you think? Do you think there is a way in for me to like get into design based on my penchants for filmmaking and this scientific mind I have in my background?
I think that's a good place to start. I think, especially in the digital area, all those lines are blurred. I think that you can be a great filmmaker, but you also need to know how to make a good-looking set of. You need some kind of design background for the way it looks. You know, what am I trying to say? Like the trailer and even the type. You know, what kind of type are you going to use? Comic Sans for everything? Are you going to use papyrus like they did in Serenity? Yeah. You know, the whole thing was papyrus, and all the graphic designers are going, papyrus. But anyway, do you see what I mean? Yeah. I think when you say you're not a good graphic designer, I think graphic design is kind of the core of all the media, because you just have to know how to make things look good.
So I don't have any skills for design, really. But with the classes I took with you and at Northwestern Connecticut Community College, I do have, I gleaned just a bit where I have the kind of just a little bit of the mind of a designer, where I can notice, like, you probably shouldn't have used yellow for the font, that there's too much space in between those letters. You should fix the kerning.
Right.
So I have this framework by which I can look at something and be like, that could be fixed doing this. But I'm just not, I don't have like the digital hands to really work with doing designing. You're doing like graphic design and stuff and such.
But I think you just described what you need to be a good filmmaker. The small amount that you have enough knowledge to create something that's visually pleasing, I think, and then go on to, I know you like to write, I know you like to research, I know all those things. So, and those are important things. So I think when everybody looks at their skill base, I think, and if you don't know how to do it, you just train yourself in that small amount that you need. You don't need to be the best graphic designer in the world to make a great movie, and vice versa.
It's like I think ultimately speaking, I can think about graphic design. I learned just enough that I have a mind for design, but I just cannot do it. For some reason I can't.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to. It's just like me and sewing. I'm going to force myself to sew, but traditionally I can't. I really can't do it very well. I don't like it very much, but I'm going to teach myself how to do it. That's why I love YouTube, because, man, if you don't know how to do something, just look it up on YouTube and you can watch it over and over again. I'm not quite sure what they said. You can back it up a little bit and say, oh, that's how you do that, you know? And it's visual on top of all that. Yeah, I think video is very powerful in that way. You know, before YouTube or just digital video on the internet, you'd see something and you have no choice you can't look at it again and say, how'd they do that? Now you can, scrub back and say, oh, that's how it's done, and scrub back, look, and then you learn it that way visually.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really powerful about digital video, especially on the internet.
Oh, well, I guess we're done.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Woo! Is that fun for you?
That was all right.